All right. Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, November 14th. This is our Lartey Wellness Group expert discussion where we discuss different mental health topics. Today, we wanted to discuss abandonment anxiety, how to understand and overcome your fear of abandonment. And pretty much what a fear of abandonment is. It often affects how you experience relationships. Um, it it's a natural fear to losing someone you love. Uh, which naturally, if that's what you're constantly worrying about, that can really have an effect on all the relationships in your life. It isn't a mental health diagnosis, but sometimes can be related to different mental health conditions, such as borderline personality disorder. And it's deeply connected to emotions like shame and anxiety, in some cases, rejection sensitivity. Um, it's also linked to mental health conditions that involve fear of abandonment, like borderline personality disorder and depression. And there's two sorts of abandonment that someone can fear. That's emotional abandonment and physical abandonment. Um, so just wanted to discuss this, with the expert team, see what everyone, their experiences with treating, clients that have fear of abandonment, how you've helped them overcome it, some of the symptoms or signs that somebody might exhibit if they do have a fear of abandonment, and kind of get down to like the root cause of what really causes someone to be so fearful of being abandoned, whether that's emotionally or physically. So yeah, I'm happy to open it up and hear what everyone has to say.
All right, I'll start off, and then I'll like to see what the therapist, the people doing in the trenches doing the counseling are seeing with their clients, and I just quickly read through the article. It had some good things. The couple points I would say is something that's come up for me recently, being an older person, is it never goes away. Fear of abandonment. It's good that it's not a diagnosis, because it's not something that is unnatural, and something that the article did not talk about is to relate it to hierarchy of needs. It's related very well to attachment style, but if you think about what human people need, we need, so on Maslow's hierarchy is the we talk about connection. We all need connection, and that's right in the middle of Maslow's hierarchy with it's before you get to self-esteem, and it's having peers. It's why teenagers sometimes will put their peer groups ahead of their parents. But and what I like to say to clients who, whether it's fear of abandonment or fear of being alone, fear of rejection, it all kind of goes together. It's the flip side of what your need is, which the need is for connection. So everybody has a fear of being alone. And if you are having trouble in a relationship, it's going to exaggerate the fear of abandonment. And, which is why it's good, to have, people can't get all their socialization needs met from just one person. So, with that, I would love to see what people think about, how it's related and what they're seeing in their clients.
All right. Yep, you can go ahead, Michelle.
I don't know if this is related to the hierarchy of needs, but I experienced this with my clients in relation to how successful they feel in life. And a lot of times when you are experiencing believe that you haven't been successful and you start to do the digging work, you find out that that issue about success or being viewed as successful a lot of times goes back to this issue of abandonment. So that has been my experience, that it usually will show up as something different in your work. And when you start to do the digging, this issue of abandonment comes up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like that's kind of like the concept of not feeling like you're good enough and like self-sabotaging yourself in that way, self-sabotaging yourself from being successful. And maybe that's a manifestation, like you were saying, of that fear of abandonment. Lori mentioned attachment styles. I think we touched on that at one of our other discussions, but I'd like to kind of expand on that and the different type of attachment styles that people can exhibit, and how does a fear of abandonment kind of manifest itself in regards to our attachment styles. Does anybody have anything to offer on that subject? All right, so the article says psychologist John Bowlby developed attachment theory, which suggests that the way we connect with our caregivers in early life shapes how we form attachments with people as adults. Mary Ainsworth, a psychologist who built upon Bowlby's theory, created categories for different types of attachment style. And today we generally recognize 4 different types. We have the secure attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and disorganized attachment. And all of these, like avoidant, anxious, disorganized, they're all known as insecure attachment styles. And that's what makes it so hard to form close and mutually beneficial relationships. And research actually suggests that there's a link between fear of abandonment and insecure attachment styles, especially the anxious attachment. And then additionally, there was a study in 2015 that involved people with antisocial personality disorder, and that found that avoidant attachment was actually more common in people with the condition. So, I mean, does anybody have any experience with these sort of insecure attachment styles and ways people can start to form more secure attachment styles? Yep, Lori, you can go.
Okay, so the most trauma victims are going to have especially if they're not every trauma victim is going to suffer, but the ones that are going to come for counseling are certainly suffering. And the one of the things that the article says is, you have to help the clients work on their ability to be able to improve their attachment style, to be more secure. The problem with saying it that simply for everybody just to be aware of is that in order to improve your attachment style, you have to, it's kind of like improving communication skills, and communication is a two-way street. So you have to have somebody to practice with. And so you might have to, as a therapist, be, looking for signs that somebody is not trustworthy, and when, the article mentions Bowlby and Ainsworth. Another important person to mention is Erickson for Erickson's developmental scales, because it's where you develop trust versus mistrust. If the caretakers are going to be too inconsistent and not come and address your needs as a kid. So if you can't trust because you haven't had trustworthy people in your life, then you might either be not trusting anybody, or maybe you're over trusting because you haven't learned the boundaries and how to look for warning signs. So the attachment style is something that insecure happens naturally if you haven't had good caretaking. And to develop a secure attachment style is going to take learning how to watch for people who abuse, your trust, and how to be more trusting. So I think that's an important thing to mention to go with it. So anybody else has something related to that they've seen that'd be great.
Great, thank you for that, Lori. So we talked about the attachment styles and how that can kind of correlate with a fear of abandonment. There are some emotional and behavioral signs and symptoms that people can exhibit that can kind of help a therapist diagnose if that's what a person is struggling with. So some of the emotional signs of fear of abandonment, that would be panic or anxiety about being alone or not coupled, sensitivity to criticism or rejection, shame and self-blame when something goes wrong in the relationship, fear of intimacy or closeness, worry when a relationship seems to be going too well. And as Lori was just talking about, distrust. So that's a big theme when it comes to an emotional sign of fear of abandonment. Some of the behavioral signs: using comfort foods or substances to cope when stressed about a relationship, tendency to pull away physically or emotionally when feeling criticized, codependency or placing the needs of your partner over your own, history of relationships that haven't supported your mental and emotional health, and a tendency to become attached quickly to a new relationship. It also says children can show some unique signs of abandonment fear, such as crying when separated from primary caregivers, stress and withdrawal in new situations, either more clinginess or more detachment from parents than usual, anxiety about going to school or daycare. And it sounds like, a lot of this fear of abandonment is rooted in, some sort of need not being met when we were a child. So how does that manifest in our life? How does that um, affect the relationships in our lives? Does anybody have anything to say about how how a fear of abandonment affects the relationships in our lives? All right, Chelsea, you can go.
Well, I kind of want to go back a couple to some of the points that were made earlier, if that's okay first.
Yeah.
I think it was Christabel that was expanding on Lori's discussion about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think it's a very good point that, yeah, when folks feel that they're not successful, um, they fear that folks are going to abandon them or they're not going to be worthy enough for somebody. And it's so counterintuitive because with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think connection is probably close to the base of that triangle for Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then self actualization and success, you know, those things that come closer to the top of that triangle, um, that comes last. And we were always taught in school, oh, you fulfill the needs on the bottom first, and then you're able to work your way up. Um, so it seems kind of backwards that we're trying to be these successful people first before we find connection. Um, I guess we're hoping that people would want us when we're not successful. Um, that would be an interesting selling point in the dating world, I think. Um, and then going back to Lori's, last question, which was a question that you also had, Brianna. How do we improve attachment style? All the, like the Psychology Today articles I keep reading and other things online, they keep saying, well, we tend to stick with our avoidant or anxious style because we're used to that. That's what we're familiar with. And we pick partners that, um, I guess, really bring that out in us the most because those types of partners are familiar. And the literature keeps saying, oh, just, you have to go outside of your comfort zone and start trying to date people that are securely attached. And that just seems like I'm wondering, does anybody have concrete advice inside of that that would help a person get from being uncomfortable with, trying to leap over to a securely attached person to, from where they are now, always going for the bad people that make them more anxious and more avoidant? Does anyone have any concrete info on that? Because all of the articles that I read stop right there. And I feel like I'm at a loss beyond that when I'm talking to clients.
All right, Michelle, you can go.
I usually work to build the courage to try new things, and that's based on the experience or a review or analysis by the person that I'm working with on how well past behavior patterns or past decision making practices have worked in their lives, and that's based on their assessment. So if they assess that, I'm really tired of like being with people who don't appreciate me or who don't have time for me or who are not available to me, then we start to look at, okay, well, then what type of person, what are the characteristics of the type of person you do want? And then we use that as the guide when we have new encounters to decide, okay, how does this person stack up to this list that I've created for myself? So it's very self-empowering, very driven by what the person wants or the difference type of person that the person wants to bring into their lives.
Yep, you can go, Chelsea.
I love that, Michelle. And I think the easiest way for people to figure out what they want in a partner is they have to really know who they are as well and figure out what their values are in a relationship, list that out. And then that just makes that process of determining what a good partner is for you is. So yeah, I like that. Thanks. And I think it might have been Michelle that was making that connection with Maslow's. I'm not sure. I wasn't looking at the screen at the time, but everybody's comments have been so wonderful. So thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like something that can help people overcome a fear of abandonment is self-discovery, and that's actually one of the four tips they list here on the article we're reading off of. It says self-discovery, learning about yourself can help you identify how abandonment anxiety impacts your thoughts and actions, and as an extension of those things, your relationships. While self-discovery is often a part of therapy, you can also practice it on your own, by keeping a log of your feelings and events that might be causing them. Curiously checking in with yourself when you feel a surge of emotion. You can start with something like, wow, this is a strong feeling. What memories or fears could be at the root of this? Reading up on attachment theory and considering what attachment style you've developed. Using a workbook like this one to identify situations that induce your fear of abandonment so you can be better prepared with coping techniques. So I think that's just an extension of what Chelsea was saying, and just really knowing yourself, wanting to know, really knowing, you know, what you want out of a relationship, what kind of things make you feel good in a relationship, and what kind of characteristics or actions you look for in a partner that make you feel good and make you feel secure. Let's see. All right. So, through you guys' experiences, is there any other tips that you would offer for people to kind of overcome this fear of abandonment? All right. The additional tips the article lists, first and foremost, would be therapy. If you are dealing with, you know, a fear of abandonment or abandonment anxiety, a therapist can help you recognize and overcome your fear of being abandoned by empowering you to discover your attachment style and how it impacts your relationships, learn how to form secure attachments with others, develop your emotion regulation skills, find out whether a personality disorder or anxiety disorder is causing your abandonment anxiety, heal from trauma or childhood experiences that contribute to your fear of abandonment. And then it lists some specific types of therapy, like dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, emotionally focused therapy, EFT, and then psychodynamic theory. The second tip was the self-discovery, which we just talked about. Third would be support groups. Community and connection can be important parts of healing from trauma. You might find a support group helpful if you experienced a traumatic abandonment in the past, grew up with emotionally unavailable or distant parents or caregivers, find yourself repeating patterns in relationships that you'd like to change. Some support groups for abandonment fear are local, and many focus on abandonment in the context of romantic relationships. And then lastly, the last tip is to have self-compassion. Self-compassion is a way of viewing yourself first with kindness instead of judgment. It can help you combat shame and other thoughts that might come up alongside your abandonment anxiety, like, I'm not good enough for my partner, I deserve to be left on my own, I'm not lovable. It can take time to build self-compassion. And a couple ways to practice that are by challenging negative self-talk and using mindfulness meditation. So those are some tips for overcoming that fear of abandonment. Is there any last things anybody wants to add, or any last advice for our viewers that anybody would like to offer? Yep.
I want to say thanks, Brianna, for pulling it together. You know, lots of tips, and I would just caution. You know, it's again, it's not something you fully overcome because it is a natural. You know, it's a natural state if you're not getting your need for connection met, but you want to be able to overcome your tendency to seek out relationships that are not fulfilling, you know, and that's what you get help for.
All right, that's good advice. Thank you all for participating in the discussion. And I'm gonna pause the recording now. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.